I wish everyone a good morning. Appreciate you being here today. We do have some visitors, and when I say visitors, I use that loosely. What that means is I recognize your face, but I don't always remember your name. I know who you belong to, but I'm going, man, they're growing up. Hardly recognize them sometimes. Jeff, did we have on the overhead the names of the fellows that helped reorder the pews? We did? Okay, good. I was a little distracted this morning. I hadn't checked that out yet. But hopefully you did. We had listed then those that were willing to get down on the carpet and work on heavy wooden benches and get those organized in a new fashion. I appreciate that effort. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those that did that. And that's really what I want to talk about today in the excuse me, in the course of the lesson, is I've entitled it, I've Done Something Good. And I think you would call this maybe a short that was posted on our webpage, and I think that YouTube thing too, to where you can go out and you can and click on this and you can get a little short message. And so I want to start with really just a very simple examination of where this little clip comes from. I might even try playing it for you here if I'm lucky. But this is just Matthew chapter 6. Let's see if this will, in fact, do something. Because it's supposed to be. I didn't think it would work. This machine is not on the internet. So let me just read it to you. Well, that's what it looked like if you hunted it down. Maybe a little clearer. Matthew chapter 6. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed of them or noticed by them. Otherwise, you'd have no reward with your Father who's in heaven. When therefore you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your alms may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will repay you. And when you pray, you are not to be as the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners in order to be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you pray, go to your inner room, and when you've shut the door, pray to your Father who's in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will repay you. We're pretty familiar with these verses. There's nothing too uncommon here. We're accustomed to that. I've done something good. I want to drill down in verse 3 just a little bit, where it says, when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Now, I want you to think about that phrase just a minute. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I want to take this Bible, and I want to transfer it. I'm not going to watch. And look, I can hand that Bible off to my right hand, and I didn't even need my eyes to guide me. Now, if my left hand and my right hand didn't know what they were doing, where's that Bible going to end up? Does that sound like God's admonition of how to get our work done? I want you to think about this a minute. Does that even make sense to you? How clumsy am I when I'm trying to do anything, mow the grass? I was cutting bush the other day. You ought to see the scrapes on my hands. It's horrible. It's horrific. And that's when my left and right hand were working in coordination. What if I was smashing hands into the bushes randomly and I couldn't even control to where they could work together to scoop up a bunch of branches after I cut them off the bush? Well, that's ridiculous is what that is. So since this is a ridiculous example of how to work effectively and efficiently, especially in the giving of your alms, should the giving of your alms be such that it's chaotic and out of order and there's no coordination? Do you think that's what this says? Or do you think maybe it says something else? Well, I think it's to be taken as a figurative term. And so, because this is such an over-the-top or hyperbolic statement, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, there's got to be a more allegorical answer that makes sense when we read something like this. So what is the figure? What does this mean if I'm not to let my right hand or left hand know what my right hand is doing? I thought, is there something hidden here, or is it just on the surface of it? It's a nonsense statement. So I went to a couple commentaries to see what they had to say about it. They're not authoritative, but I thought I'd read them and see what I could find out. The Pulpit commentary says, "But when thou," and that thou being emphatic, "let not thy left hand know," etc., "so little effort should thy kind action have upon thy memory, there should be no self-consciousness in it." Okay? Now that's kind of oldie time talk. If you can get past the oldie time English there, what does that say? I'm not to keep score. Okay? I do something good for someone else. And I didn't want to brag about it. I don't tell people my business when I'm doing good for other people. But you know what this verse is saying? It doesn't matter whether anyone knows about your good deed or not. If you're keeping score in your head, you open the door for pride. You open the door for conceit. Man, look at me. Isn't God lucky to have me? Now, I made sure not to blow the trumpet because I don't want to be seen as a hypocrite. Man, that's bad. No one wants to be a hypocrite. But if my left hand is aware of what my right hand is doing, I believe this figure is talking about what goes on in my own head and what goes on in my own heart in regards to the good that I may do for someone else. So even if I've managed to keep it a secret, even if I've managed to do it without the trumpet and the fanfare, what verse 3 says is it doesn't matter how other people view this. How are you viewing this? Do you see yourself as a gift to God, or do you see God's gifts working through you? Do you put another notch on the rifle barrel? Is that what you do? The stock, I guess, for another point for me, another score on the scoreboard? Is that how we do this? So that's Pulpit Commentary's suggestion. Expositor's Greek Testament says, "Give without self-consciousness or self-complacency, the root of ostentation." Now, if you don't know what that means, I just said what that means. It's the same thing. It's keeping score and going, well, look at how valuable I am to God. That's ostentation. That's lifting yourself up above your station. Bengals Noman, and since I put this in read only, I couldn't correct my mistake. He's not a Jewish commentary, he's Lutheran. But I took by the name and then I looked him up, 17th century Lutheran commentator by the name of Bengals Noman. I thought that's a Jewish name I ever heard one. So far from holding a trumpet, there should be no self-consciousness in it. Okay, so we had the earlier example of blowing the trumpet. I mean, you all have heard the phrase, someone who blows their own horn, haven't you? We still use today that figure of speech that was used over 2,000 years ago. Did they have real trumpets and real trumpet players? I don't know. It's very possible they did, because the Eastern culture often will pay performers to help them mourn, to help them celebrate, to help them bring recognition or attention to themselves. So I think this very well could be an actual trumpet player announcing the good things that I'm doing. Now, first of all, just to think about God's people getting that ridiculous about it kind of puts you in the frame of mind as to how you might respond to that in an equally ridiculous way. It would be better if you didn't even have any coordination amongst yourself as to say, whoa, man, look at what I've done, and I'm going to keep that just in my head, not anyone else's, but just in my head, I'm going to keep score of that. This is Eliot's commentary for English readers. And I had heard this before, but I'm just going to read it to you because it's simpler that way. It is possible that there may be, I'm not saying it's definite either. The commentator says it's possible, and I agree, it's possible that there may be some reference to the practice of using the right hand for offering gifts at the altar. The symbolic application, though an afterthought, is still suggestive. The right hand is the higher spiritual element within us that leads to acts of true charity. And the left hand, or the left side, is the baser, more self-seeking nature in mankind. We ought, as it were, to set a barrier between the two, which is, we've already talked about what that is, as far as possible. In other words, to exclude that mingling of motives, which is at least the beginning of evil. That mingling of motives. So I've got this pure intent of my heart to be giving and charitable. And then I've got the desire to brag about it. And those are competing motives. I've got the genuine warmth in my heart to do something good for someone else without expecting any return. And then I'm a prideful person. And I want to give myself credit. I want to give myself kudos for what I've done. This dual nature of man is not a new idea. It is who we are. It is what we are. It is how we were created. We have this tension within ourselves between the higher purpose mind that says, I concur with the law of God. And then we have the flesh that says, but I want what I want. So this is not a new idea. Are Christians encouraged to do good works? You can nod or you can raise your hand. Are Christians encouraged to do good works? Okay, thank you. I got some nods. I got a yes. What does that practically look like? How am I going to encourage others in good works if it's just so important that I let no one know that I've ever done good for anyone else in my whole life? Does that make sense? Are we to teach by example what our practical understanding of good works is? I would affirm yes. That should be by example. Okay, if I'm going to be your example, do we have examples of examples? Those who set themselves up and said, I would like for you to examine my life and pattern your life after the things I have done. Do we have any examples of that in the Scriptures? Nods or hands? Yes, we do. We have multiple examples of that. So how do I encourage others to pattern their behavior after me if I have to hide my behavior or the behavior of others from any observation? How can I be an example if there's nothing to examine? How can I be an example, or how can others be an example? I'll give you a couple practical applications, and then we'll hit a couple scriptures. I have regaled some of you with the antics of me emptying out my mother's freezer. And I've horrified some of you with the same antics. I don't know but what the power went out on that freezer 6 years ago. I have no clue. And it was full to the brim. So if you've not heard me talk about this, I did draw this conclusion. I safely believe today I could work in the sheriff's unit doing the worst crime scenes and keep my stomach down. Because I did that freezer, and I'm telling you what, that's a story for another time. But this freezer now stands empty at my mother's place. Most of you could probably now walk into the room where it sits and not lose your lunch. The smell has come way down. I wouldn't guarantee all of you wouldn't have to run for the door or get a bucket. So it's still kind of Now, I cannot pick up that freezer by myself. Empty, it still weighs several hundred pounds, and it's big. It's a chest freezer. So I'm asking you now, after describing in exquisite detail how much fun a project this is going to be, I need some help moving my freezer over to the landfill or recycle center or wherever it is I have to take it. Do I have a show of hands? Who would like to volunteer to help me move this freezer? Oh, I got one caveat. I got some hands, thank you. I got one caveat. I want, now there's 4 corners. I think 4 of us can probably do it because we have to get through some doorways. You get 8 bodies on it, it's too many. I think 4 can probably do it. But Brian, I want you to come on Monday between 1 and 3 and lift your corner. And Brace, I want you to come on Wednesday around noon and pick up your corner. Now, Jeff, you're Jeff, right? Hillicord, you're coming on Friday after we have biscuits and gravy. But because I don't want any of you seeing each other do good works. I don't want any of you looking around and saying, oh man, look at these guys. Look what they're doing to help out Greg. This is great. Oh, I can't see that. Because if I see it, it negates the good that's being done. Now, in my scenario, is that freezer going anywhere anytime in the near future? It's stuck in my mother's house. What about the work of feeding the Hellenistic Jews in Acts chapter 6? We have a need. We have a responsibility. We have opportunity. All described in Acts chapter 6. And so there's going to be some men who are going to be appointed to see that this work gets done. Sounds reasonable enough. Select among you, brethren, 7 men of good reputation, full of the spirit of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. All right? So let's line up our volunteers. I want you guys in charge of feeding the widows. Now, of course, in order for your good deeds to go recognized by God, because they have to be in secret, none of you are going to know who gets food. You're just going to go out and work on your own individually. And we figure with a random shotgun approach of meals going out to widows, eventually all the meals will find the right places. And we're going to weigh all the widows on a weekly basis, and the ones that are losing weight, you might take note of those and make sure they get more visitation. The ones that are getting a little plumper, you might cut back. Does that sound like someone who's in charge of the work, or does that sound like a disaster? This is just common sense examples of the coordination and the working together and the sharing of the good works that don't set aside the value of that which came from the heart to begin with. Just because someone else knows about it doesn't mean that God doesn't count it to your account. Oh, and how were the widows to be selected, by the way? 1 Timothy chapter 5 says, we need to know them to be women of what? Good works. We need to know them to be women. So you got one on the list, and it's like, well, I never heard about her doing anything for nobody. So she's not getting nothing. We're starving that one out. We're going to see how long she can hold out. The widows that came under the responsibility of the congregation were those that had a reputation for good works. We are doing ourselves a great disservice when we believe that others cannot know about our good works. Now, it's already been made clear in the Scripture. It's not my job to talk about my good works, because that's very likely a means by which I am, again, marking my own scoreboard. But if I want to tell you about something Brace has done, I'm not only saying it's okay, I'm saying it's the right thing to do. When we have people that are impacting our lives in a positive way out of the goodness of their heart, and you'd like to share that good news with someone else, please tell them about the good that's been done for you by one of your brothers or sisters in Christ. It's that simple. How are we going to know by example if we don't know what people are doing? It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't work. But if we hesitate to share, that has consequences too. Philippians chapter 4, you have Paul's account talking about how he recognized the good that were in other people and other churches. Philippians chapter 4, and I begin verse 10. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have received your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. So Paul says, I know that you care for me. I know you want to help me out. You didn't have really a good chance to do that before. You didn't have the opportunity. But it's not because I speak of want, he says. He's addressing the church in Philippi. It's not because of want. For I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along in humble means. I know how to live in prosperity. I know in every circumstance I have learned the secret of being filled and hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So Paul's kind of been, in some respects, kind of like that widow we got to put on the scales every week. He says sometimes it was abundant. Sometimes the people that were just more than what I needed supplying it. And other times it was like, I could use a Meals on Wheels right now, guys. Or maybe some bandages for my bruises and my beatings. But Paul says, I didn't seek these things on my account. I seek them on your account. He says, nevertheless, you have done well to share with me in my affliction. And you yourselves also know, Philippians, that the first preaching of the gospel after I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, but you alone. So Paul's calling them out. He's calling them out for their good works. And Paul's putting it in a newsletter that is being distributed to every church in Asia. Isn't he? So he just didn't give them a little shout out on the screen on Sunday morning. He put it on Facebook for the world, for all time to read. Do you think Paul had any problem, any hesitation in talking about the good that other people have done on his behalf? If he did, he had a really funny way of showing it. Mr. Pettigo read 2 Corinthians for us, chapter 11. And Paul recounts how he again was, I think, combating. There were false teachers or false apostles that seemed to be, based on the context, as best I can understand it, they seem to be finding opportunity to take advantage of churches by saying, we're here with the truth, we're here as apostles, and you don't want to you don't want to muzzle the ox while he's treading out the corn or the grain. So you guys need to take care of us. We need to draw our living off of our work here with you as evangelists. And I believe that's the scenario that Paul says. I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let them run us down as the true apostleship based upon that liberty that they were exercising that Paul says, I'm not going to exercise in your presence. I'm not going to do that. But what he then goes on to say is once again, Paul puts it on the Facebook of the world, puts it in a document that will be circulated among all the known churches and remain enshrined in God's New Testament for all of the final dispensation of the earth. You know, nothing is permanent. But you can't get any closer to permanent than this. And Paul said it for all time. You guys over there took care of me so that I didn't burden you guys here. Those guys over there did. And I'm going to boast of this throughout all the regions of Achaia, Southern Asia. What's Paul going to boast about? That he didn't draw his wage from the church in Corinth. Well, so Paul is living off of air now. What is it? Rainbows and unicorns? How is Paul supporting himself? Someone else did it. And I'll name them. I'll tell you who it was. It was the Macedonians. Did that wipe out all of the good intention that the Macedonian church had for Paul by providing for his need? Of course not. Why are we hearing this stuff? Why can't we read this? Why should we care? Is there any reason for me to make a lesson out of these scriptures? Why should we even care? I think we have good reason to care. Something good has happened. I've done something good. Well, it's not my responsibility to broadcast that, but I also shouldn't be ashamed, especially if I'm working collaboratively with others, to get good things happening. I shouldn't be hiding my works. I shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed if other people know that I did something nice for someone else. If my motivation was praise, then I have been fully rewarded. If my motivation was from the heart and appreciation for all that God has done for me, and a willingness and a desire and a joy in passing that blessing on to someone else, then if other people hear about it, it doesn't take away what I have done. So let's look in a little more detail, a little more examination of how the scriptures demonstrate how good deeds get talked about, but importantly, why. And this is Alan Malone, and I don't know if he'll play or not either. It worked at home. Let's say not. So Alan has also a clip that you're more than welcome to go look for. A short, I don't know the terminology. I'm calling them clips. I don't know. A short. So Alan Malone is talking about the grace of God. And what does Alan say? If you go look this up, I hope it sounds like what I wrote down at least. Alan Malone said, and he doesn't mention by direct reference the passage in Acts 11. I think he says verse 23. But turn over to Acts 11 if you want to. Maybe I'll just read that first. Acts 11 and 23 says, Then when he had come and witnessed the grace of God, he rejoiced and began to encourage them all with resolute heart to remain true to the Lord. Now this is Barnabas, isn't it? Have I got that right? I heard a yes. It's Barnabas speaking. Or it's speaking of Barnabas. Well, he says I. Or he, excuse me. It does say he. So he, Barnabas, had witnessed the grace of God, and he rejoiced and began to encourage them all with resolute heart to remain true to the Lord. So here's what Alan had to say. The source of the devotion, the grace of God that we see in the book of Acts, Barnabas saw the grace of God. For the last several years, Alan's words, I've been trying to learn better how to see the grace of God. And it has a lot to do with what we see in this very verse. Because we see in verse 23, people that can see the grace of God will be like Barnabas. And Barnabas said, I'm glad to see the grace of God. Alan says, don't you want to be glad? Don't you want to be joyful? What an opportunity to be like a Barnabas and see the grace of God at work in the lives of these brethren and be joyful and be glad. And he encouraged them in this. Of course he would, because he's Barnabas and he's the encourager. This is from Matthew Henry commentary. This one's been around for, I think, about 120 years, something like that. When he came, and he had seen, again, Barnabas, and had seen the grace of God's will to the people of Antioch and the evidence of his good work among them, he was glad. He took the time to make his observations, not only in their public worship, but in their common conversations and in their families. He saw the grace of God among them. How do we see the grace of God amongst ourselves? How do we see it? When we act graciously to others is how we see the grace of God amongst ourselves. That's the only way Barnabas could see it in the people and in their lives and in their families and the way they reacted with one another. Barnabas said, I saw the grace of God and I was glad. And that is a blessing every one of us should be able to enjoy. By knowing of the work that goes on here, the love and support that people have for one another, it's not a secret. It's to be shared joyfully. How's God supposed to demonstrate His love for Christians? By supplying every need with His servants, but also ensuring in the minds of the saints the ever-present promise of unmerited favors delivered from God at the hands of His ministers. It's not only the works themselves, it's the confidence and the assurance that as I have need, there will be others who will step up to the plate and fulfill that need when I cannot. So the very giving and the very sharing of my resources and my time and my talents is to be an enjoyable thing. It's to be a pleasant thing. It's to be a pleasant exchange or experience between two Christians who are of like mind. But more importantly, I don't even have to know what my future need will be. I don't have to worry about what future needs I may have, because I know, I am 100% sure that you are willing to provide that need when I cannot. I know that. As sure as I'm standing here, I know that as sure as there's a stinky freezer in my mother's house. That's God's grace working in me, working in you. We serve because we love. Our service is not service if it's not with love. That's what Jesus told the Pharisees in Matthew 6. If your service is self-serving, it's not love. And God doesn't give you any account because it wasn't from your heart. It was from your own pride or your own quest for name or recognition or attaboys, you know. That's been kind of a meme in itself. Give someone an attaboy. You know, you get an attaboy at work means they're too cheap to give you a raise, right? When you get an attaboy. You ever heard that? Should we be giving out attaboys? What do you think? Are you comfortable with that idea? I say don't just get comfortable with it, but engage in the practice yourself, is what I say. Because I think that's what Paul's saying. I think that's what Barnabas saw when he saw the grace of God. We're to teach the young to love. Old moms or maybe middle-aged moms, teach the younger. Be careful how I say that. To what? To love their husbands and their children? you kidding me? Don't they know how to do that? I don't know. Do they? There's always room to grow. There's always room to add to your repertoire of how you show your appreciation for other people. How do we learn that? By watching TV? By playing on the internet? Or getting out and doing good things for other people and hearing about the good things that others have had done for them? That might be one way. Express freely the appreciation for the good that's been done on my behalf. I got a big stack of cards at home. And I reread those 2 weeks ago. With affection and thanksgiving in my heart. For all that's been expressed on my behalf. And if you want to see the list of names, I'll print it up for you and give it to you. I hope I haven't missed any cards or lost any. But I'm not going to hesitate to tell you that that is an act of service, and that is an act of love. That's appreciated. And for you, it might be a meal, or cleaning out the gutters, or a conversation. Don't underestimate the value of a good conversation as far as being a good work. I've had lots of good conversations in recent months. Sometimes they come with meals and sometimes they don't. But I want you to know that people are doing that for me. And I want you to know I appreciate it. And I can stand here and call some names. The only problem with that is on the fly I'll forget people that I should also mention. That's my only hesitation. Because I don't hesitate to share with you that it's gone on and continues to go on. Encourage others to be involved by sharing the good that's been done for me. When I tell you it matters, you're thinking, oh, I don't know what to say. I'll send a card. You know, the cliche is, well, that's the least I can do, right? Well, don't discount it. It's not the least. We want a culture of works through love. We want that culture to where we backfill the need that other people have. We not only want that culture, we need that culture. And we need it badly. We need it in spades. We need it exponentially. We need that culture because this world is a tough place. And many of us face tough and hard things. And without these moments of tenderness and compassion and gratitude, how are we going to get through it? How are we going to do it? Have I convinced you? Does anyone want to debate me on the topic? Or let's discuss it, maybe would be better. Talked about the word debate recently. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But every time you read that, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. Remember, that's talking about me. That's not talking about who hears about what good's been done. And would that be a hindrance on your opportunity to share with others how you have been blessed by someone's generosity. May it never be. Put that thought far from your mind. The scriptures are clear on the subject of establishing a culture of love and good works. Saved by grace, witnessing the grace of God, God gets the glory always. But we should not be afraid that someone might find out something we did nice for someone else. And I encourage you all to share those instances in your lives with the people that you know and love. And we'll create and embellish and grow that culture of love by good works. If you have any need this morning that you need to express to us, that's another good work that could be done. And that's something we can do together right now. And if you have concerns in your life, or you have concerns about my life, I suggest you take that one offline. But I'm ready to listen to you nonetheless. If we can be of any help to you this morning, if you want to render initial obedience to God and be baptized upon your confession of faith, we can do that as well. Please let us know how we can help you as we stand and sing.